All right. Well, welcome everyone to Pants on Fire, Exposing Ruling Class Lies. And today's episode, we're joined once again by Comrade Rossana, who is the co-chair of CPUSA. And she joined us for our very first episode to talk about Cuba. And we're very glad to have her back to talk about China. So welcome, Rossana.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle.
So let's talk a little bit about the trip that you went on recently to China. What was the background of that, and what was the purpose of that trip?
The purpose of that trip was to help members of the communist parties throughout the world to get to know a little bit more about China's modernization and their path to not just alleviating poverty. They've alleviated extreme poverty, but they want to build even more on developing a better quality of life for all of Chinese people. So that's essentially what they mean by modernization. You know, it's to build on what they met their goals, especially of alleviating extreme poverty, and now they want to, move forward.
So this was a worldwide conference?
It was. It included 20 countries. There's 21 delegates and included 20 countries. 2 were from Nepal, 2 communist parties from Nepal were there. So that's why there was 21 delegates. So it wasn't all of the communist parties. I don't know how many they actually invited and how many were able to attend.
Mm-hmm. So how long was the conference? Was it like a one-day event, or was it a week?
No, it was actually 2 weeks. It wasn't just a conference. What it was they took us on the different provinces to show us exactly how they alleviated poverty, the different forms that they took. It wasn't just one standard to follow or one model. It was very people-centered, and it was very with a complete analysis of what the resources of that community were and how can they use those resources to be able to provide a sustainable income for the people in the village, or in the community or in the province. So it was a variety of ways that they did that. And in some cases, it was very individual. If there was a family that lived in a very remote area, it was either if the family chose not to move out of that remote area into a maybe more public or a more condensed area, then they would help that family with the resources they need to be able to sustain themselves and be able to also live in their homes. So even if their homes were falling apart, the government would come in and help them rebuild something that was strong and sustainable. And then they paired up some of the companies, the companies and the skilled workers with the communities, depending on what was needed.
And so I think you just hit on one of the things that I was going to ask you about. One of the, I guess, the myths or the misconceptions that we hear a lot about in our Western media about socialism and socialist governments and communism in general is sort of the idea of the forced collectivization and, forcing people out of those more remote communities into either cities or into larger kind of collective farms. And so you observe that that's not the case.
That is not the case. There were some communities, for example, that were rebuilt, small communities, and they pointed out, these older couples, they decided they didn't want to move out, so the government helped them to rebuild their apartment area or their living area. So it was very like I said, it's very people-centered. It is what the people needed. How do you meet the aspirations of the people? And so it wasn't about how the government was going to control everything and everybody no, it's about what do the people need? What does the people need? And how can the government help assist that process along with the people? It's not about the government doesn't come in and just hand out things. They held meetings with the village and said, okay, and they did even individual visits in smaller villages about what's the situation, what do they want, what do they need, and then they held a whole community meeting, and then they just moved, in that direction of what was needed, what they have, but it was all people centered with consultation with the people, and what are the people going to contribute in the village. They may have merged, so in some areas they merged their land in order to be able to grow, for example, grapes. We visited a grapevine. They merged all of their land so that they can grow. And then the farmers, the people in the village took care of growing the grapes and, maintaining it, and not just grapes, for fruits, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And so this is, to me, fascinating, because so many of the people that we talk to who have visited China, they talk about the cities, these big mega cities, and how elaborate and high tech the cities are. And I think we don't talk a lot about the rural communities. And so it sounds like, was that sort of part of the focus, or was that the majority of what you saw?
No, we also went to this, we were in Shanghai. We started in, no, sorry, not Shanghai, Beijing. And we visited communities in Beijing with those high-rise, condos, not condos, but apartment buildings, housing that they have there. I don't know, 100 feet, 100 floors. I didn't count any of them, but they're pretty large, and they're all, and together. And we visited some of those, and what they have is they have they have like a community center that provides all the services that the community may need, and that they serve, I think they said, I don't remember exactly, so I don't want to really say a number, but quite a bit of people within that, radius of area. And they have the center provides not just like community centers like we're used to here, where you can do arts and crafts, or you can do sewing, you can do those kinds of things. It had that as well, but it also provided services such as if you needed help with filling out government forms, if you needed help with whatever, maybe utilities or maintenance in your apartment, if you needed some immediate health care, if you needed some immediate psychological, mental health care, and even some child care in some areas. And the community center, it offered and encouraged the maintenance of the people's culture. There's, I think, 57 ethnic minorities in China, and they really want to encourage all to be able to maintain their culture. And so they all would offer classes on the different areas, whatever the interest of that community is, or whatever the culture of that community is. And then they also have Marxist classes for the community, so that the community begins to learn about what is Marxism and all of these kinds of things, and why is it that the government is focusing on that. That's their main principles are Marxism. And also they have a whole party building structure as well, building the party within the different communities. But it's not a condition for helping the community at all. It's all part of it. Oh, and in one of them, they provide singles nights. So that it's like they have a little hall, and they have dances and socials, so that all young single people can come together and meet each other.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it was a tour as much as it was a conference. So you had some informational sessions, but did you guys get on like a big tour bus and go around to different places, or how do you get to some of the remote areas?
Yeah, well, they didn't have like tour buses per se, like nothing that we're accustomed to here. They were small. I think they were maybe the size of a 20-passenger van kind of a thing, one of those little school bus type looking, something similar to that. And they would provide all our transportation, and we would go to whatever area. We did have meetings with the different international department. We had meetings with the hospital. We had meetings with the different universities that focus on Marxism, Leninism, on cadre building, and their different ideas of how they're seeing the world. What is their process for making an analysis of the situation? And they have like sort of what you call think tanks, where they pose a question, or the president poses a question, and they explore what, based on the principles of Marxism, how does that apply to China, and how can they apply it? Does it apply? Does it not apply? Why and why not? All of those things. So it's all very, they make an analysis of things. They don't just knee jerk their response or their actions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And this is something that's been going on for a long time, the efforts to alleviate poverty. And they've stated the goals, and they've met the goals so far in terms of eliminating extreme poverty. And so at this point, the focus is on, is it safe to say the focus is on improving quality of life for everyone?
Yes, it's continuing to improve the quality of life for all Chinese people. And what are the next steps? Well, one of the very next steps is that they feel that it is important to build peace, to fight for peace, for a peaceful world. If there's not a peaceful world, then the Chinese people are not going to be able to really move forward, because they're constantly being attacked. And so they really see peace as a primary goal. This is why you hear on the news, that Xi Jinping is meeting with, or there's, China's meeting with Putin, China's meeting with Zelensky, China's meeting with other warring countries, countries that are experiencing war and things like the conflict. And so, because they see peace as very key for them to be able to move forward. And they're also, one of the things I think is really important is that they're willing to share share their experiences with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever resources, they're willing to share it without conditions. Unlike the United States, when they go in and say, oh, we'll give you this or we'll give you that, but you have to do this and you have to do that for us. It's not the same in China. And I want to clarify, that it's important to understand that they have alleviated extreme poverty, but it doesn't mean that people are not still needing, better quality or more pay. They're, at least none of them are going hungry. All have a place to live. All have some form of child care, as well as some form of health care as well. And education, of course, is free there.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that just considering the massive size, not only in population, but just actual physical space, has made this a really difficult endeavor for them to take on, to reach some of these remote communities and to, provide healthcare and education. Are they building new hospitals? Is that one of the things that they're doing, or how do they go about that?
I mean, if you remember when COVID first hit, they built 2 hospitals within, I think it was 6 days to 2 weeks or something like that. Mm-hmm. Immediately, I think what they've shown is that when it's people-centered, when it's putting people first, things can really move quickly. But why? Because you have the people also participating. The people in China are not just sitting back and having it done for them. They are participants in the change. All of them like I said, in the communities, in the villages, they're all included and they all participate. So it's all a very communal act to improve their life situation. So I'm sure they've, encountered hardships and things like that, but it's made easier because everybody participates, because it's something that's good for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And so when they talk about modernization, I think a lot of people hear that word and they probably think about what the industrial revolution that was had here in the United States at the turn of the century, the 20th century. And I'm wondering, is that a comparison that you would that you would subscribe to, or is this a totally different definition of modernization?
Yeah, I think no, it's my understanding of the modernization is to be able to now give a better quality of life for the Chinese people. Not necessarily, as I think we think when we think about modernization, we think about, high tech, AI, robots, and things like that. But from what I understood is that that's not their meaning of modernization. Their meaning of modernization is to bring everybody's quality of life, improve everybody's quality of life at whatever degree that would be in each, area, circumstance, individual, that kind of a thing. So that's what they mean by modernization.
So what were some of the things that really stood out to you, especially going around and visiting these different places in China? What were some of the big things that you noticed?
Well, I think for me, the most important part was the process, understanding the process of how they alleviated poverty. When I was a kid, my mother would tell me, eat all of your food because there's children starving in China. And that has really stuck with me, especially right now, because no one in China is starving, But here in the United States, the richest country in the world, with only 300 plus million people, and China with 1.4 billion people, they have been able to alleviate poverty, extreme poverty. Why can't we do it here?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's that's something that just it's a big question that we should all be asking, and so that's something that has really, that I've brought back, and I'm committed to asking, and bringing up everywhere, is that if a country with 1.4 billion people can alleviate extreme poverty, why can't a country with 300 million plus and richer in many respects than China, why can't we do it here? Of course, the answer is China put people first, and the United States doesn't put people first. They put profits first. And so we've got to change that. We've got to change that. The other thing is that even though there's 1.4 billion people in China, it doesn't feel crowded. I was in China the early part of 2019, and I got sick, and I was taken to emergency there in China, and it was just the local hospital. I wasn't taken to no exclusive private or anything like that. And it was an emergency. They did lab work and x-rays and even medication and all of that. And, here in the United States, we are very hesitant to go to the emergency because we know we're going to spend all day over there. We just know it, and we may not even get any answers because of just the nature of our experiences in an emergency room. Well, I was out in 4 hours. I had kidney stones. I had actually a very large kidney stone. That's what was causing the pain and everything like this. But I was out in 4 hours. I saw 2 doctors. I had a CAT scan, a blood work, and prescription, medication for the pain and stuff like that. And it wasn't that there wasn't anybody in that hospital, because there was, I remember going up for the prescription, and I think there was like 7 lines, seven of those lines. What is that? There was, I just lost the word. Anyway, there were 7 lines packed with people. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be here forever. No, I was out in less than 30 minutes. They're very efficient. Once again, I think it's because they put people first, not profit. And so that's something that really has stood out with me. The other thing is that there's a city called Nanjing, and they are sister city to many, many cities throughout the world, including 12 of our cities here in the United States. And I think we can build on that, St. Louis being one of them, Los Angeles being another, and I can't remember the others. But I was very surprised in St. Louis, because St. Louis, tends to be a little more conservative.
Yeah.
But they even have a sculpture that St. Louis sent to Nanjing as a friendly gesture and stuff. And so I thought that was very interesting. I think that's all I can remember right now.
So that's I had never heard that about the sister cities. And what what does that entail, being a sister city with is it Nanjing?
Yeah, Nanjing. Uh-huh. I'm not too clear, but it's just, being able to build relationships within the city, share, the different things that are happening, host, and like Nanjing can host members from St. Louis there, or St. Louis can host members from Nanjing, sort of a friendly exchange of experiences.
Hmm. So one of the things I guess that people, especially in conservative areas here in the US, would say is that at what cost are they able to completely eradicate extreme poverty? You know, nothing is free, is what people would say. And how do they pay for that? And I think there's an idea that that means everyone is kind of giving up some individual liberties in addition to having to pay a lot more in tax in order to accomplish that. So I mean, obviously, yes, the US can alleviate poverty tomorrow if the will was there to do that. But the conservative argument is always that why should I have to pay for these other people? And so how does China pay for pay
Well,
for
you know, let's look at the United States. We have how many wealthy people in this country that don't pay taxes, and what do our taxes? Our taxes go to run our country, to meet the needs of its people. That's essentially, what it should be going to, right? But all these companies, they get away with not paying any taxes, and well, we can just look at it, all kinds of, Donald Trump, whatever, other, just so many wealthy people find loopholes. There's a lot of loopholes for wealthy people to not pay any taxes. And so it's the poor that are really paying the taxes. We're the ones that are being burdened by these taxes. And we're not getting the services that we already are paying into. So it's not about a handout. It's about we have been paying for it. We pay for our disability. It's not a handout. We pay for the services for the firemen. We pay for the services for housing. All of these kinds of things, we pay for it. It's from our tax dollars.
Mhm.
It's the wealthy that aren't the ones. They're the ones who aren't paying, their fair share. So in China, it's the other way around. The companies, they do pay their fair share of taxes. The government uses what they have, whatever the people pay into, they use it for the betterment of the people. And so it's not giving up any liberties. Nobody's giving up anything. I would imagine, and I can't say for sure, but if you're in a small village and there's 20 people in this small village and there's only, I don't know, 10 potatoes, everybody's going to get half of a potato, and everybody's fine with it. And why are they fine with it? Because they understand that it is for everybody. They understand that everybody has worked that land. Everybody has put in their fair share, their work into it. And so it's just the right thing to do. It's
Mhm.
not about handouts. It's not about, giving up any liberties. They don't give up any liberties that I saw. It's about working together. And it's what we all want. We're so much better when we work together than when we just work for ourselves. And I think even our own well-being and mental health is really helps in that process.
Mhm. And so one of the things you did get a chance to sit down and interview the general secretary of the Communist Party of Sri Lanka. And I know one of the things that he talked about was that period of time when the Soviet Union was starting to fall apart, basically. And the differences between how China took a different approach at that time. And one of the things he said, and we are going to play that interview in its entirety. One of the things he said was that rather than focusing on a political restructuring and political and opening up of the political system, they focused on the economy. They focused on a restructuring of the economy. And so is that tied into what I think what we're seeing now in terms of this effort in modernization?
Well, the comrade, like I said, there was 21 delegates. And so we had a chance to exchange, what's happening in our country and all of these kinds of things. And the comrade mentioned that he had been in the Soviet Union, studying in the Soviet Union I think in 88, 89, something like that. And then I thought, well, now he got to see what the Soviet Union was like, right before it fell. And now he gets to see, he's a person that is now being able to see what is happening in China, present day China, and can be a witness to his observations of the differences. Because one of the things that I think we all think about is China gonna face the same problem that the Soviet Union did? Will they fall as well, after whatever years, decades, or whatever forming? So I thought, well, I asked him if he would do an interview because I think we're all curious about the differences, what is it? And here we have a live witness, that can give us a live testimony thing. So we set up a time to interview. And one of the things that he says, the main difference is that in the Soviet Union, instead of restructuring and focusing on the people, what they did is they restructured the political and the government and did not focus on people's needs and people-centered. Where in China, that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what is happening. So he didn't feel that he didn't have the same concern about what was going to happen to China, or if China was going to face the same challenges that the Soviet Union did, or would fall, as the Soviet Union, well, China would fall as the Soviet Union did. So I thought it was a very interesting interview and perspective. And I really thought about our younger comrades, and then that I thought they would really, be interested in hearing his testimony. So I used my phone to,
Yeah.
I didn't have any special equipment, just, I used my phone to do that.
Well, it's a fascinating interview, and he's talking about a fascinating time in history. I mean, their entire books have been written about that time period, and a lot of people want to put all the blame on Gorbachev, and when you look at it, the problems started a lot earlier than him and what was going on at the time. And I guess to kind of close things out, another myth or another misconception, I guess, that we hear sometimes, especially from the libertarian types and some of these more fringe groups, they talk about, what is China even a socialist form of government at this point, or is it more of a market economy? And the comrade from Sri Lanka discusses those changes and what happened, and the restructuring of the way China started to approach socialism. But I wonder if you could just speak to that question of what would we say to people who would say, well, look at China, they have billionaires, they have these big companies, and companies actually want to operate there. So how can that be a socialist form of government?
Yeah, that's always a recurring question, definitely. The thing is, we cannot see things as a pure form. As Marxists, as scientists, we do not see things as pure. It has to be that things have to be one or the other. Absolute no. There's a transition. There's a whole transition period that takes place from capitalism to socialism to communism. It's all transition, where you take what capitalism has to offer and make it work for the people. And so this is what China is doing. And they're very clear about that. They are building socialism, building. Keep in mind, they are building socialism. They don't say we have socialism. They say we are building socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really important for us all to understand, that they are building their socialism based on China, the Chinese people, and what they have as their resources. When we build socialism here in the United States, we're going to build it based on what we feel as working people is necessary. And we're going to use the resources that we already have established. Why reinvent the wheel? Because, I don't know, Chrysler already created the solar car. So why are we going to say to Chrysler, forget it? We're going to build our own solar car. We're going to tell Chrysler is we're going to now make this car available to all working people. You're no longer going to make a profit. Or in the meantime, for example, in China, all companies are regulated. There are regulations that all companies, for-profit companies have to follow. They pay taxes. They make sure that they pay their fair taxes. They make sure that they give a livable wage. They pay a livable wage. And so there's regulations that the Chinese government has on, and they follow up. It's not like here where we may have regulations, but companies find their loopholes, or there's none of that going on over there. So I think it's really important that we cannot look at life as absolute, that if it's not one, it's or the other, then it's no good. That's not the way life is. There's always this transition, and nothing can be pure. It's a big mistake. We make a big mistake if we set that ourselves up for that. It cannot be black and white. There's always that transition. And that's true with everything, and even in our personal life. Nothing is ever perfect, so why should we expect anything that way? And, and we have to respect that each country is going to find their way towards socialism, build their socialism based on the needs of the country, not based on what we in the United States think should be it, because we don't even live there. We don't know we don't know what people go through. We don't know what the needs are. Just as people in other countries, they don't know what we go through. They don't know what our needs are. Many people think the United States is, there's money grows on trees. They've been taught that, it's the land of opportunity. Well, let's ask a lot of these homeless people, let's ask these veterans who thought that they were going to be fine after they served their country. Let's ask these young people who were told, go to college, you're going to get, after college, you're guaranteed a job and a house. And they're still either living with their parents or living in the car or trying to figure, couch surfing or whatever. It's not the land of opportunity that, so we have our own issues we got to deal with. And I think that that's where we should focus on.
I agree. Rossana, thank you so much. And when we come back, we're going to play the full interview with the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Sri Lanka. And I think we will nominate you as the Pants on Fire foreign correspondent now. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. All right, Kyle, take care.
The Communist Party USA is pleased to announce the upcoming 2023 International Conference. Hosted by CPUSA's International Department and the Peace and Solidarity Commission, this virtual conference will be held on July 29th. Join us as we discuss important international issues such as NATO expansion, the new Cold War against China, and the ongoing Cuban embargo. The fight for democracy and socialism at home cannot be separated from the struggle against imperialism abroad. Visit redworldreview.org to register for the 2023 International Conference.
I'm G. Veera Singha, and I'm the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Sri Lanka currently. Actually, I was elected as the General Secretary of the party in 2020. I joined the student movement of the Communist Party in 1975. Then in 3 years later, I became a member of the youth movement of the party. And another year later, I became a member of the Communist Party. So I joined the movement while I was schooling. And then in 1981, I received a scholarship to do medical studies in Soviet Union. And I had to continue for 7 years. It's medical graduates had to study there 7 years, because the first year was the Russian language year, what they call the preparation or preparatory faculty that I had to complete, and then 6 years in medical school. So I can remember the change of leaders in Soviet Union while I was there. First, probably in 1981 itself, Brezhnev passed away, right? And then, if I can remember, then the person who came to power was Andropov, and after Andropov is Chernenko, and after Chernenko it was Gorbachev. So, since early days of his becoming as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Soviet Union, he started two interesting weaves, or rather he started discussing two interesting, shall we say, weaves. There is one was Troika, or the restructuring, and the second was glasnost, or the transparency. Right? So he emphasized these two new features in all his major speeches in party congresses, and then in other major speeches. And I can remember there was a thing called Gorbachev mania in West. Wherever he visited, there were hundreds of, sometimes many hundreds, sometimes thousands of people gathered to greet him. Maybe them in Europe, maybe in America, or in other parts of the world. And then, of course, there were these Western leaders who were very happy to visit him and, to meet him, like Margaret Thatcher and so on. So I actually, my arrival was in 1981. But, when we look at, or rather when we try to understand what happened there, that what one can see is that the slowing down or stagnation of the economic development, or rather economy, or rather the productivity, probably was not very impressive. And living in Soviet Union, we saw all these things, like when it come to the consumables for the public, even sometime food, maybe clothing, maybe they were available at a level. But since we were international students, since we were traveling to other countries, we saw the difference, right? Okay. At time we saw the scarcity of various food items in the country, right? And then when it come to light industry, that you have heavy industry and light industry. Especially the light industry, we saw was not very impressive. The very various equipment, gadgets, you see, they were produced in the country, but not very impressive, or not very qualitative, or not at the standard of that era, right? Compared to other countries. So generally, what you understood was that you see that there was a kind of stagnation, right? And then only in this period, this Gorbachev coming to power, And then he started this restructuring and glasnost, implementing these two. I don't know whether you can name them as ideologies, but these two aspects, right? But then when it comes to perestroika, one would expect perestroika of the economy, or rather restructuring of the economy or something like that. But unfortunately, that did not happen in Soviet Union. Rather, we saw some kind of restructuring happening in the political system, right? And with this concept of glasnost, people started, they were criticizing left and right and having meetings, public rallies, and criticizing everything that they were doing those days. I mean, everything that the government was doing that time.
The people were criticizing.
I mean, various groups.
Okay.
Various groups. You see, now, if you want to be analytic about that situation, it was not secret that the Western, in the Western world, there was an organized move to dismantle Soviet Union, to dismantle that system, to bring down the Communist Party from the power, right? So, without giving much consideration to those attempts and those activities, the Gorbachev and the Communist Party behind him they were continuing to restructure or to change the Communist Party administrative system, right? They were introducing various changes to party, it seems, but not to the economy. Now, being Marxist, probably we need to agree that economy or economic system or economic structure, that is the basis. All the superstructures are developed or are built on that foundation. If we don't touch the economy, you see that, or rather, if you try to introduce changes to superstructures, your political system is a superstructure, right? If you try to change the superstructure without touching the base, then you won't be achieving. So
because it doesn't impact the lives of people.
Yeah. Because actually, the economy, that is what Marx says, right? Economy is the basis, right, on which everything else will be decided, right? If you wanted to achieve some changes, you have to touch the economy, right? The main problem was the productivity, which was stagnant at that time. Now, but then if you go further, a little beyond that, you can remember Margaret Thatcher, then Ronald Reagan. They were introducing late 1970s this neoliberal economic ideology, right? Actually, they were revitalizing the capitalism on that day, right? In that time. Because capitalism also faced a kind of stagnation towards late 70s. But they were reinvigorating the capitalist system by introducing newer things, like that is what we call the Washington Consensus, right? With the Bretton Woods institutions, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and then on the other hand the World Trade Organization. They adopted what was theoretized in this neoliberal economic strategy. So that was to compel the countries to open their to become open for the trade and liberalize trade and open the markets, right? And go for privatization, these kind of and bring down the taxes, right? All these policies were introduced, right? By doing so, you see that they provided a new new push, or rather new support, right, to for the capitalism to survive, not only survive but to go forward. But whereas now the socialist world led by Soviet Union, was not touching the economic basis, but they were trying to do repairs in their political system. So invariably, I mean, that was destined to fail, which happened, right? I mean, so I can remember when Gorbachev, actually we also being students, we were very enthusiastic followers of Gorbachev that time, in the sense that, we were very interested in what he was talking. He was very eloquent, and, he was explaining, he was charismatic, and, and then wherever he goes, that thousands of people gather him and cheer him. Probably must have been organized, we don't know, by looking at what has happened now, right? But then later, we started to understand that was not what they should have done, right? So you see, the party became weaker and weaker. The authority they were losing, the party was losing their authority among the mass, right? And then you see, the party was central to everything, to keep the union, to keep the army, to keep the government. But when you are weakening the party from inside, you see, all these aspects became weaker and weaker. Either their authority in government, their authority among masses, their authority in the army. They were central to keep the union. If there was no Communist Party of Soviet Union, then you can't imagine of having a Soviet Union, because it was the central leadership that then, if you lose the authority, the party lose the authority in the Soviet army, then of course Soviet army won't be able to keep the union together. So that is what exactly happened, right? That is what happened exactly, right? So, ultimately, actually, Soviet Union, I mean, the first, it was the Eastern European socialist countries, one by one after the other, starting from Poland, right? So there were other factors were there, started to fall, right? And what Gorbachev said was that more perestroika mean more socialism. That is what he said, right? I do remember that. More perestroika mean more, but actually the opposite was what happened was the exact opposite, and one by one the countries were falling down, and then finally the Berlin Wall also came down, right? And then of course, and what happened during last few days of the Union, probably all of us are aware of those things. By that time I was not in Soviet Union, but I was in my country, because I left Union in 1988. That was the Union still, but Soviet Union was break in 1991. So it was broken. And finally, you see, Gorbachev had to agree to to dissolving of the Union, right? Which shouldn't have happened. Actually, as a communist, and being a senior person in Communist Party of Sri Lanka, what we think is that what they should have done was to go for economic reforms rather than political reforms. See, this is from where we can come to the Chinese experience, or China also taking a turn on the same period, late 70s. It was Deng coming to power in 78, right? And he was 76, maybe 70, 1976 Mao's demise, and after that Deng Xiaoping came, and in 78 he introduced this opening up theory. You see that, you understand, you see that this is in late 70s, right? The capitalist world was introducing new economic strategies to revitalize capitalism, because they also were stagnating. And Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries failed to do that. And whereas China under Deng Xiaoping, tried to introduce certain new changes to Chinese system. China also was following actually the Soviet model up to that point. But then, of course, China was introducing these new things also late 70s. You see that now you can see these three things. One is that the Western world and the Soviet Union and the Eastern European, the socialist world, and China is taking a different turn. Right? Okay, 78 and maybe 12 years or 13 years later, Soviet Union and other countries collapse. Right? And China, of course, what we can see now is that they have followed this opening up policies, and now they have come to the present status of economic development. So 78 they introduced these policies, and today we are in 2023. It's about 45 years, right? And by 2010 they were the second largest GDP, and by now, of course, they are the largest GDP according to purchasing power parity. That the other way of measuring the GDP, right? So the more accurate measure, right? Purchasing power parity. Of course, you see that when we travel, even before traveling, we know that how fast China has developed, right? And they are actually competing capitalism in all leading areas like science and technology, and then media, communication, or rather, communication technology or communication area, and then poverty alleviation. You see that they have achieved in 2021. By 2021, they were able to achieve this poverty alleviation. To bring out people from absolute poverty. So they are, now in this visit, all of us were able to witness how far that they have reached, and you can assume, you can predict that that they will be leading in all these technological, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, quantum computing, biomedical industry. Probably in all these areas, either they will be first, or they will be the leading, or they will be in par with any other developed country, right? So China, now when they were opening up, when they were introducing this opening up policy, Deng Xiaoping said, if it catch mice, right? We don't mind whether it's black or white cat, right? So because the issue.
What was that saying again? If it catches mice.
Yeah, no, we don't, because now the task was to bring out people, Chinese people, more than billion of people, bring out from poverty. Yeah. Whether it's socialism or capitalism, that any government in power, if people-oriented government, the first task would have been to bring people out of poverty.
So what he was saying was that it didn't matter whether it was through capitalism or through socialism.
Yeah, what is the strategy that you are using here is not matter. What is important is to bring out people from, because you had to do that at that time, because people, we know Chinese people, they what a poverty that they were living in. They were floating in rivers, they were eating, these things, and so it was not a small task. More than 1 billion of people. So therefore, whatever the system, the first task would be to bring out people from poverty. That is exactly what they did, no? That is exactly what they did. And then, of course, because we being Marxists need to understand that capitalism has not lost all their potentials. Right, all their potentials. And then China was not the most developed capitalist country in the world at the time of the revolution, right? Now, if you even go back to the classics, right, this is the, that one would expect these revolutions to take place at the highest level of production, and they are due to the contradictions that take place within the system. But whereas these things happen in China not at the highest level of capitalist development. No? So therefore, you have to go through these these social development stages. Actually, you can't. There is no way that you can go. That during the time of Soviet Union, they were talking about non-capitalist way of development with the support of developed socialist world, right? But now what has happened is that socialist world also has collapsed altogether. Altogether. So then there is no socialist world. Therefore, we have to survive. Actually, now what is happening in China is that Communist Party is in power. So they have the objective of developing socialism and go beyond, right? And it is being constitutionalized. It is in the constitution. It is in practice, and they are in leadership all over. But then they are using various strategies to advance the production and the productivity. This is what is happening, and it's a gradual process, and it will take many years. And as long as capitalism remains in the world as a decisive factor, one can't expect, to do drastic changes in one single country, how big they are, right? However, whatever their sizes, or it's practically impossible. Therefore, we in the international communist movement, we need to understand, probably in my view, the Marxism, and we always have to be Marxist and be scientific, right? And no point in blaming Gorbachev for what has happened in Soviet. How can one single person do that kind of destruction? It is impossible because of our inherited weaknesses of the system. There were many other weaknesses. They were alienated from people. The party was an elite, right? And there was a bureaucracy. And actually, the Chinese party has learned from all that. Now, when you are traveling, when you are in China now for last 2 weeks we were here, you can't see that the party is as a different elite here. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about the people who are moving around them. We are here, party people, and with the party, some of these leading members of the party, but none of these people who are moving around cares us, right? They don't see us as a privileged lot. As a privileged lot, right? So, but that was not the case in the Soviet Union, at the time of Soviet Union. So therefore, probably China has learned a lot of lessons from what has happened in Soviet Union, and in that system, so far they are doing well, right? And so most important thing is to keep the power in the hand and to introduce the changes, as the environment permits. You can't do things on your own.
Conditions
there should be So probably this is what is happening in China, and we probably in the international communist movement, I think most of our parties agree socialism is a very long-term perspective. But that and in the in current time, current period, what we have to do is to respond to the situations in our countries. Main antagonism remains the antagonism between imperialism and general public masses of countries. So therefore, probably we have to unite in anti-imperialist struggle. This is what we are doing. All of us agree on that matter. And there may be difficulties in understanding some concrete, specific issues, that is natural. But I think what is most important is to keep the unity and understanding among between parties, and to keep our movement move forward. Keep our movement move forward.
Did you see? I know that we visited several universities, Marxist universities, where they develop cadre at different levels, and of course beginning with the classics. And so, did you see that in the Soviet Union? Was that part of the school, curriculum or classes that were offered in the Soviet Union?
Yeah, actually, when I was in Soviet Union, I was there as a medical student, but then I closely associated the party in the area where I did my medical studies, right? Mm-hmm. That is the Western Ukraine, and the city was Lvov. And now the Soviet party school system, about which I have to be very honest, and I don't have much understanding. But now if I take my party, all my senior leaders, leading figures, they had some kind of party education in Soviet Union. Apart from the most senior ones, or the founders, they never had any party education in Soviet Union. But the second generation, third generation leaders, probably all of them had education in Soviet party schools. They had different types of 5-year learning periods, 2 years learning period, maybe 6 months, like that. But I have my doubts about the party education system there, and about when you compare, that definitely Chinese system is much advanced. Whereas Soviet system was very dogmatic. They were trying to teach the classics.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, maybe history of Soviet Communist Party of Soviet Union, starting from, and then maybe philosophy, political economy, historical materialism, dialectical materialism, atheism, maybe, and then of course scientific communism, right? Scientific socialism or communism, right? So all these subjects probably they were teaching in a very dogmatic way. I understand this from what I learned during my learning in medical school, because all 7 years I also this Marxism was a part of my curriculum.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
So they were very dogmatic in teaching. All these subjects were taught to us. Actually, that is how I studied, right? So they were very dogmatic. As you can see here, in one hand they are very advanced. I mean, they are advanced in the sense not Marxist stuff, but I mean the technology and the other stuff, right? Okay, and I mean they are collaborating with the highest level education centers in the world. No, I mean they are collaborating with Harvard. They are collaborating with this MIT, no? They are collaborating with Oxford, Cambridge. I mean, I'm sure that they are not trying to learn from them the Western way of whatever. Yeah. No, but some other aspects of very high level of education. That maybe their experience, the way that they are teaching, and all these things, right? And the other thing is that, they are here, if you take the party education, there are places where you teach Marxism-Leninism, but then there are other ways or other courses of introducing Marxism-Leninism to different sets of people here. You see that now any CEO, any director level person, right, of in government institutions probably will have to go through some kind of party education. That may not be the entire system of Marxism-Leninism, but certain aspects, right? So as a tailor-made kind of party education to different sets of people, different levels of people, different sets of people, right? That is what happens. Probably this is different from what happened in Soviet Union. The mainly that Soviet party education was very dogmatic. Whereas here they try to be very practical, and they try to be very timely, and they use they use advanced technologies also to teach and to so that is also important, because now if you don't use that kind of technology, you won't be able to give the student or the listener the stuff material in a way that they can remember, they can understand, they can learn. No, that is also important. So these were some of the differences between the education there and here, party education.
Do you also think that well, from my observation, it seems that it's just not teaching Marxism in the classroom, but teaching Marxism and how to apply it to your community. So when you say the different levels of teaching, you're introducing Marxism, and how can the village or the residents of that province apply it to building their own society?
Yeah,
do you see that as...
Yeah, of course, that is also another thing. You see that now Chinese comrades are using the term localizing Marxism. Localizing is that, that is actually now to be very frank, I never thought of this, until I came to the 200th birth anniversary events in China, no? That was in 2018. So you see that, then they were, as a preparatory activity, they were asking certain questions before coming here. How did we localize Marxism in Sri Lanka? That term came to familiarize myself on that occasion only, right? Mm-hmm. That's the first time that I heard that term, localizing. But before that, what we thought, Marxism is universal, and of course, fundamentals are universal. There is this exploitation, these things are fundamental. Fundamentals, no? Mm-hmm. They won't be changed. But application, of course, it's always there are changes. There are local specifics, mm-hmm. right? Now, we can give any number of examples, right? But I think it is not a difficult thing to understand. And your cultures are different, your languages are different, your behaviors are different from country to country. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, even when it comes to political ideologies, the application, the use, that should be different, right? Should be different. So now, say for an example, a very good example was that, when Russian Great October Revolution took place in Petrograd or Moscow, right? Mm-hmm. Because they were the places which had heavy concentration of working class. That was not the way the revolution took place in China, because there was no such concentration of working class in cities here, whereas they started it from rural areas, no? Capturing power from rural areas and, gradually moving towards the cities, no? Mm-hmm. That is how it happened. So that was the application. Right? So there are these differences. Definitely there are these differences, and one has to be very creative in applying Marxism to their own conditions. Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest lesson is the Chinese are trying to convey to us is that they are creating their own model of socialism. They definitely have the well-being of the people, and this is based on their conditions. This is how they see it, and it appears to me that other Marxists or other left groups and some communist parties criticize because of this open economy or the market economy and stuff. But what they're asking is the true application of Marxism is you have to apply it to your conditions.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to adapt to the conditions.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not an absolute path.
Yeah. And that having said that, we have the fundamental things and fundamental objectives, fundamental goals that they are, that's that you are going through different ways and different tactics and different strategies that you are using to reach probably one common goal, right, which is not seen in very foreseeable future. That is the reality, right? That is the reality. No, actually, there was no prescription to socialism. Now you see that even Lenin, now even to Soviet Union, he introduced a new economic policy. which was not followed by Stalin later, no?
Yeah.
That is what happened, no? A new economic policy, that he, Lenin himself said that you need different modes of production and different forms, no? He wanted to invite the other companies and, other countries to operate, right? But of course, that was towards his last days of his life. And then one of his, probably the last document drafted by him, actually was about China, no? He has said that in that letter, for Chinese revolution to survive, for Russian revolution to survive, the Chinese revolution should take place, right? So this is what he said, but in that letter, right, in that writing document. But unfortunately, you see that Chinese revolution took place many years later. But of course, Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 without, now Gorbachev was here probably in 1989 or 90, I can't remember. It must be just before Tiananmen Square incident or after that. I know that, Chinese comrades were advising him, you see, to not to dismantle the system, right? But he was, and I don't know, when you read certain documents now and the books written by certain individuals, there is a personal contribution also from his side, from his Raisa Gorbachev, his wife's side, right, to a certain extent. But though it can't be, in my understanding, the main reason, because if there was a party, there was collective democratic centralism. The decision must have been made collectively, no? So therefore, you can't you can't blame Gorbachev alone. But probably he also contributed in a way to the destruction.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for listening to Pants on Fire, Exposing Ruling Class Lies, the podcast produced by the International Department of CPUSA. Visit our website, cpusa.org, to learn more about the party. Follow us on Twitter at CPUSA Department, and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast app.